Amazing K9 discovers hidden room in nursing home. What was unearthed after 10 years is incredible. Margaret Jensen sat in the corner of the nursing home library, her fingers tracing the spine of a worn-out book. Ghosts of her past loomed over her, each fading memory a sharp pang in her heart. Once a beloved school teacher, now reduced to watching the world drift by, she felt invisible, trapped in a gray existence despite the bright mornings that filled the small Midwestern town outside. Rusty, her loyal golden retriever, rested his head on her knee, oblivious to the shadows of despair clawing at her spirit. She longed for moments of connection, her legacy hanging by a thread, as fearful thoughts spiraled in her mind. Each day felt like an echo, a cycle of monotonous routine, where smiling faces faded before they could spark a flicker of warmth inside her. What had happened to the vibrant woman who inspired countless students? The laughter, the joy, the moments of triumph. They felt like distant memories concealed behind the thick veil of time. She dreaded seeing her reflection, not just for the wrinkles or gray hair, but for the hollow gaze that stared back, one filled with the unanswered questions of her life choices. Was she just a chapter in their lives, now forgotten? Everything shifted with the arrival of Sarah, the new occupational therapist, who burst into the nursing home like a summer storm. Her enthusiasm was contagious, stirring something buried deep within Margaret. Yet as she observed, conflicting emotions swirled inside her. Admiration tugged at her heartstrings while a pang of jealousy incited bitterness. Could she really let someone else breathe life into this fading existence? The air buzzed with potential, yet it scared Margaret. What if this fire lit her own aspirations, and they extinguished before her eyes? The thought rattled her restless mind. Before she could wrestle with those thoughts, laughter erupted in the room around Sarah. The senseless chatter and reminiscing were both a balm and a dagger, pulling Margaret from her shell while simultaneously reminding her of what she had lost. She felt calls for engagement pull at her hardened soul. They were slowly slipping through her fingers like grains of sand. Rusty stirred, noticing her internal struggle, and nudged her gently. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously. It makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Yet, just as Margaret felt the slightest flicker of hope, Rusty's frenzied sniffing drew her back to despair. He jostled against an antiquated bookcase, revealing a long hidden door. They pried it open, unveiling a musty room filled with boxes that encapsulated forgotten remnants of their lives. Dormant dreams, once cherished. As the allure of those treasures sparked in the room, Margaret's heart raced, pulses of longing shooting through her veins. Yet the creaks of old memories reminded her of the reality beyond those treasures. Those memories were at risk of being snuffed out forever. There it was, a box filled with her letters, pieces of herself she had sent out to students over the years. But now, threatening shadows loomed larger. She feared not just the loss of nostalgia, but of herself. What would happen if the world chose to sweep away their shared histories, digging deeper into her pressing solitude? Would she be left with nothing but regrets? Her stomach knotted, and as she stood, breath unsteady, a deeper question echoed in her mind. What did it mean to leave a legacy when the world felt ready to forget? The storm within her grew louder, and the room trembled with possibility. The room still smelled of dust and regret, and as Margaret knelt beside the box of letters, she felt an overwhelming mixture of nostalgia and anxiety coursing through her veins. Each letter represented a moment, words of encouragement and hope penned to students she once believed in profoundly. Yet, here they sat, not just forgotten but essentially buried in a hidden room, just like the vibrant aspects of herself that had faded over the years. What if these letters were all she had left? A chilling thought gripped her as she glanced at Rusty, who sat patiently by her side. His unwavering presence was a reminder of loyalty, Something she felt had slipped through her fingers like sand. Would she ever again embody the passion that once fueled her life? A tension settled in her chest, a knot of fear threatening to unravel her. What if the letters had the power to reignite her purpose? With a trembling hand, she pulled one from the box, its creases hinting at the countless times it had been read. She remembered the student, Ellie, whose struggles with self-esteem had mirrored her own struggles. Margaret had written to her about courage, about the strength to believe in oneself. Through those words, she had poured her heart into someone else's future, while her own had grown dimmer. Suddenly, that brightness was beckoning her again. The laughter from the nursing home echoed faintly through the walls, but this time it felt different. Less like a reminder of what she lacked, and more like a call to action. Sarah's buoyant spirit drifted into her mind, bringing with it the notion of possibility. Maybe she didn't have to be a relic of the past. Maybe she could dig through her own regrets not just for closure, but rather to emerge anew. The letter felt heavier in her hand, laden with burden, yet at the same time it glimmered with potential. Each stroke of ink she had written once held the power to mend spirits. If only she could believe in that power again. Margaret's breath caught as she contemplated how to manifest that power in herself. What if she shared those letters? What if she organized a gathering, a space for her and her fellow residents to reflect on what learning had meant to them? A sudden rush of determination overshadowed her doubts. She might start injecting life into her stagnant world. But what would it entail? Questions buzzed in her mind along with a spark of adrenaline. She envisioned herself standing before an audience, old friends and new faces eager to listen to the stories wrapped in her letters. How could she stitch together a tapestry of connection from so many strands of faded ink and paper? But just as those thoughts painted an invigorating future, waves of doubt crashed down hard. Who would come? Would anyone even care? The fear of emptiness, of vulnerability, threatened to knock her back. But Margaret steadied herself. What did it matter if some remained indifferent? She couldn't expect everyone to understand her journey. Perhaps it was about reclaiming her narrative for herself. Taking a deep breath, she stood, her heart pounding with burgeoning courage. She resolved then to inhale the momentum of the moment, but recognized a daunting truth forming on her horizon. She needed an anchor. "Rusty," she whispered, eyes brightening. "We're going to do this." As she gathered the letters, her mind was already racing towards logistics and fears yet unspoken. How would she initiate the conversations that could change lives, including her own? Each next step loomed ahead, and in the depths of her heart, she felt the storm, the push to truly confront her past while rewriting her future. The moment had arrived to face not only what she had lost, but what she still had the power to create. Tomorrow, she decided, she would approach Sarah, the one who could help her transform those visions into reality. The idea sent ripples of hope coursing through her. Yet, a lingering fear welled up in her chest. What if she failed? What if the effort left her more isolated than before? Margaret took a shaky breath, knowing she had to confront those very questions. The hours until morning stretched tantalizingly long. Would she find the strength to forge ahead? Would she be ready to unveil the tapestry waiting in her heart? Tomorrow would hold the answers, but for now she had to sit with the reality that she was on the edge of something pivotal. Would she grab hold of the future with both hands, ready to embrace the storm? Or would fear sweep her back into oblivion? Morning light filtered through the dusty window, illuminating the remnants of Margaret's past and the letters she had unearthed. Each delicate sheet felt like a portal to a time when she was vibrant and hopeful, bursting with dreams of inspiring others. As she meticulously stacked them back into the box, a silent determination hardened within her. No longer could she allow these fragments of herself to gather dust alongside her forgotten aspirations. The echoes from the nursing home hinted at life beyond her secluded room. Margaret felt heartened by the prospect of reaching out, but a palpable fear gnawed at her. What if the residents brushed aside her invitation as trivial? She rushed to the mirror, her reflection a ghost of the woman she once was. Could she shed her insecurities like a worn coat? With a deep breath, she resolved to confront her doubts head-on. She began to plot her approach, envisioning a gathering where she could unravel the tapestry of words that had once connected her to her students, hoping to extend that warmth to the residents around her. "Rusty!" she called, kneeling to meet the eyes of her faithful companion. "We're not just going to share these letters. We're going to create something beautiful together." Apprehensively, she wondered what that beauty might look like. The prospect thrilled her, as did the thought of the stories she would elicit from others. As she prepared for the day, observations of her surroundings heightened her awareness. The peeling wallpaper, the creaky floors, and the warmth of the community atmosphere began to blend into a mosaic of potential. She made a mental checklist. She needed to speak with Sarah first, outlining her idea with clarity and conviction. Walking through the nursing home felt like crossing into uncharted territory. Every face she passed told a story. A few residents noticed Rusty, their fondness for the dog uplifting her spirits. She smiled at them, and some smiled back, tiny glimpses of connection that ignited her resolve. At long last she reached Sarah's office, her hands trembling lightly as she knocked softly. "Come in," followed by Sarah's welcoming voice. Stepping inside, Margaret was greeted with a radiant smile that dulled her anxiety. "I was hoping to speak with you about an idea I have," Margaret began, her voice surprisingly steady. As she laid out her vision, sharing the letters, creating a space for reflection, she felt the spark of her former self emerging. Each explanation grew more elaborate, as if the possibilities were laying themselves before her in vivid color. Sarah listened intently, culminating their conversation with encouraging nods and thoughtful words. She loved the idea, emphasizing the importance and potential in reconnecting residents with their own pasts. "How about we make this a regular meeting?" Sarah suggested. "A way for everyone to share their stories and create connections through shared experiences? We could inspire each other." Margaret's chest swelled. "Yes, we can call it Letters from the Heart, or something like that." Yet, as the excitement of her proposal settled in, a shadow flickered through her mind. What if she couldn't motivate others? What if her own insecurities leaked into the atmosphere, inhibiting openness? "Can you give me pointers on how to facilitate this?" she asked, suddenly feeling the weight of her own inexperience creeping back in. "Absolutely. We can take small steps together. You'll find your rhythm," Sarah assured her, grounding Margaret in practical terms. The discussion blossomed into actionable items. They spoke of potential dates, specific themes for each gathering, and how to reach out to residents who might feel shy. As they spoke, Margaret felt herself coming alive. Her very muscles relaxed as hope sculpted itself anew upon her heart. With plans underway, Margaret departed with her spirit soaring yet tethered to reality. The seeds of doubt still lingered, coaching her to tread carefully. Her mind raced with a dozen questions. Who would respond to her invitation? How would she manage unexpected resistance? And what if her heart bore the burden of disappointment? As those thoughts swirled in her mind, she caught sight of her reflection once more in a polished window panel. "I can do this," she told herself, though the uncertainty weaved through her resolve. But just then, as she turned to make her way back, a familiar figure caught her eye. Someone from her past. Maggie's breath hitched as she recognized Glenn, a former student who had faced his own trials with courage. The surprise drew a compelling grin from her, but the weight of their shared history clawed at her heart. Had he seen her too? Did he remember the letters she wrote him? Would he provide the encouragement she needed to brave the upcoming gathering? The moment felt electric, their shared past colliding with her present resolve. The chapters of Margaret's narrative were beginning to rewrite themselves in real time, and yet, standing before Glenn brought a new wave of uncertainty. Would the past be her ally or her adversary? All Margaret could do was take a step forward, embracing the unpredictability that lay ahead. Margaret's heart raced as Glenn's familiar smile merged with a tide of nostalgia. Memories of shared laughter and lessons expected to bridge the years wove through her mind like a tapestry, pulling her toward him. Yet doubt tugged at the fabric of her courage. "Glenn," she managed to say, the name tasting unfamiliar, like a word spoken at too great a distance. "Ms. Harper, I had no idea you were here," he exclaimed, stepping closer. His enthusiasm enveloped her, momentarily dispelling the chill of uncertainty. But as they exchanged pleasantries, a voice echoed in Margaret's mind, warning her of vulnerability. She caught a glimpse of her reflection behind him, gray and withdrawn. What would he think of this version of her? Are you doing well? The words felt timid, a gentle attempt at rekindling a connection. Her mind raced beyond mere small talk. She wanted depth, to unearth Glenn's hidden thoughts, just as she hoped to unearth her own buried passions during the upcoming gatherings. Really well, actually. I've been working in community outreach, helping people connect with their stories, he replied, his eyes sparkling with conviction. The unassuming power of his words resonated within her, igniting snippets of enthusiasm she had thought long extinguished. Stories, she echoed as if trying on the word for size. That's actually what I'm planning to do here, with the residents. I want to help them share their pasts. The confession emerged before she could ponder its safety, plunging her headlong into her aspirations. Sounds incredible, Glenn said, his tone sincere. You've always had a way with words. His compliment, though flattering, sent a wave of self-doubt crashing in. Are you sure you're ready for that? The inquiry, though genuine, felt like an invitation to look inwards. I'm terrified, she admitted, the words escaping like whispers of lost dreams. What if I fail to inspire? What if the past I try to share is too daunting for them? The vulnerability of unveiling her insecurities lay heavy between them. Glenn's expression softened. But what if you succeed? Really, Ms. Harper, you have the gift of light. When you were my teacher, I felt you believed in me in ways I didn't believe in myself. Maybe it's time you pass that light along. Those words anchored Margaret in a moment of revelation. The impulse to retreat, to doubt, clashed violently against the possibility of growth, both hers and others. She hadn't anticipated Glenn's recollection of her impact, a mirror reflecting facets of her past that still shone bright. Perhaps it's about more than just sharing letters. It's about fostering a safe space, she mused aloud. The flickers of understanding illuminated a distinct path, one she had glimpsed but shied away from, to create not just an event, but a genuine connection. But how do I do that? She thought, as layers of complexity unfolded before her. Glenn considered her, his gaze earnest. Start small. Let them share just one memory each session. Sometimes the simplest things can unearth the most profound stories. Margaret contemplated his suggestions, feeling a flood of gratitude, and another wave of fear. The stakes felt higher now, turning mere letters into the potential foundation of a heartfelt community. Could she cultivate enough trust to coax stories from their shadows? Thank you, Glenn. Your words mean a lot, she replied, feeling a new determination knitting itself into her resolve. Maybe I could use your help as well. Count me in, he said, a ready promise lacing his voice. We could brainstorm some themes together. I can help you with outreach. It'll be a project worth our time. For a brief moment, just before their conversation tentatively shifted towards logistics, Margaret tasted possibility. A collaboration, a confluence of past and present, the rebellion of her hesitance ignited by Glenn's support. But as the idea burgeoned, lurking beneath the surface was still the specter of her self-doubt. What if what he remembers about me isn't enough? She questioned internally, as their laughter faded into earnest dialogue about logistics. Rusty, ever the silent observer, sat close by, sensing her subtle trepidation. She had no guarantees, no promises that any of this would lead to success. The fear she had battled before returned, deeper and more primal. What if the gathering fell flat? What if she regretted reaching out like this? Margaret pushed the thoughts away, focusing instead on the challenge before her. I need to trust not just in myself, but in the power of vulnerability, she thought, a deep breath filled with fresh resolve. As they parted, a swirl of ideas and emotions left Margaret standing on the precipice of change, but Glenn's encouraging presence had broken ground in her heart. She realized that if she could invite others to share, she'd also be extending her hand into a new era of growth for herself. Yet as she stared at the dust-laden hallway that led back to her room, the old echoes of uncertainty echoed once more. What other ghosts of her past might manifest when she opened the door to her own hidden stories? Would confronting those buried fears free her, or steer her further into her insecurities? With the realization heavy on her shoulders, Margaret found herself grappling with an unexpected truth. The journey she was embarking on would intertwine not just with the lives of others, but with her own ghosts, demanding reckoning, understanding, and ultimately courage. And as she took her first steps toward that reckoning, another familiar face appeared ahead, cloaked in shadow and filled with potential for a revelation that might just redefine her path again. Yet, Margaret hesitated, her heart pounding as she prepared to confront the next piece of her story. Margaret stood frozen, the flicker of nerves transforming into a tightly wound coil within her. The figure ahead could only be one person, Judith, the former nurse who had overseen the care of residents for more years than Margaret could count. Judith held a certain authority that had always intimidated Margaret. Her sharp eyes seemed to pierce through pretense, and her dry wit could cut through the thickest of facades. The last time they spoke had been a particularly awkward exchange during a staff meeting years ago, where Judith had subtly critiqued Margaret's instruction methods, leaving her with a sting that clung longer than necessary. "Margaret," Judith's voice sliced through her reverie, cool but tinged with curiosity. "I didn't expect to see you back here." "Thought I'd give it another shot," Margaret managed, her pulse quickening. She was acutely aware of the underlying challenge in Judith's tone, as if she were being evaluated before a panel of judges. "And find inspiration in these walls?" Judith replied with a hint of skepticism, crossing her arms as her gaze traveled down the corridor, assessing its dusty, faded charm. "I hope you know what you're getting into. People change." That comment banked the flames of Margaret's uncertainty, the reminder of her past failures still smoldering in her core. She took an involuntary step back. "I'm aware," she responded cautiously, mentally wrestling with both the urge to defend herself and to prove Judith wrong. "Good," Judith said, her voice softening slightly. "You have to prepare for the raw stories that will come. Not everyone's past is easy." This offered a glimmer of understanding, shaking Margaret from a cocoon of anxiety. "I do understand that. I want to help them share, to make their voices heard." Judith stared at her, and for a moment, Margaret wondered if the nurse saw something more, perhaps even a kindred spirit. "Well, I'll give you this. Wanting to share is the first step, but be ready for what lies beneath those stories. It often isn't pretty." Margaret felt the weight of Judith's challenge settle upon her. She recognized that Judith wasn't just implying the stories would be difficult, she was warning her of the toll it would take on both herself and the residents. The idea of inviting emotionally charged narratives sent ripples of self-doubt through her. "Are you prepared to face not just their histories but yours as well?" Judith pressed, her tone suddenly softer. Margaret's mind immediately flickered to the ghosts of her own story, her uncertainties entangled with memories long buried beneath layers of self-preservation. "Can I really face them?" she wondered, contemplating an answer that felt just out of reach. What if the act of helping others unearths parts of me I'd rather keep hidden? This spiraled into a vortex of personal dilemmas. Opening the floodgates would mean venturing into her own unresolved past, crossing paths with fears that had long lingered in the periphery of her life. When silence held between them, Judith continued, "You'll find more courage in that vulnerability than you might think. Maybe your stories are what your residents need to feel safe sharing their own." Margaret's heart thumped a rhythm of determination, laced with apprehensive acceptance. Judith's insight struck a chord, revealing the possibility that her own narrative wasn't just a burden. It could serve as a bridge. "I can share my struggles too. They might help us connect," she thought, feeling that conviction spark, ready to shift the narrative. Judith's expression softened slightly, as if Margaret had passed an unspoken test. "Well, player, I can help you with the logistics of that if you think you're up to it," she offered, the challenge reigniting in her gaze. "Okay," Margaret declared, tentative but emboldened. "I think I am." And suddenly, the journey ahead morphed into a tangible commitment. The fragile threads of fear began to weave into a tapestry of purpose. "But it starts now. I can't afford to let fear govern the path," she resolved internally. As she prepared to delve into this uncharted territory with Judith's guidance, a sudden noise echoed from the far end of the hallway, voices lifting anxiously. That familiar knot tightened again in her gut. "What now?" Margaret muttered under her breath, eyeing Judith for answers. With a knowing glance, Judith straightened, pulling Margaret further into the moment as both of them moved towards the disturbance, senses heightened. The uncertainty of what awaited them clawed at Margaret's resolve, blending anticipation and trepidation in equal measure. The moment was upon her. Ready or not, the layers of her own history were about to reveal themselves more than she ever imagined. But also, what secrets would they uncover together as they approached the clamoring voices? Only time would tell. As Margaret and Judith approached the gathering of anxious voices, the tension mounted with each step. The corridor, once familiar, now seemed alien, the air thick with concern and muted hope. What had once felt shallow in her heart began to manifest as a rising urgency. Was she ready to engage not only with her past but with the present turbulence surrounding her? As they turned the corner, Margaret caught sight of a handful of staff and residents clustered near a closed door that had been long overlooked. A few faces showed worry, while others radiated excitement. It was as if they had witnessed a small miracle, their expressions hinting at the unknown that loomed beyond the door. "What's happening?" Judith asked, her voice steady yet laced with authority. "Someone's trying to get into the storage room," a young nurse named Brian responded, glancing back toward the door. They think they've heard something. It's been locked for years." Margaret's heart raced. She could feel Judith's scrutiny, a silent assessment of her reactions. There was a thrill coursing through her at the prospect of discovery, but there was also a deep-seated apprehension. What if whatever lay within the room brought more chaos than clarity? "Shouldn't we wait for maintenance?" Brian continued, unease evident in his tone as he glanced off to the side. "No," Judith interjected, her voice firm. "We need to know what's behind that door. Margaret, are you with me?" Margaret hesitated, but the pull toward this moment was impossible to ignore. It felt strangely like her own internal struggle, a push to confront the depths of what she was willing to face. "I'm with you," she said firmly, surprising herself with her own resolve. As the group maneuvered closer to the door, Margaret's mind raced, recalling Judith's words about vulnerability. Was this moment more than just a physical unlocking? Would it spur an unraveling of her own hidden narratives as well? With each step, the shadows of her past loomed over her decision-making process. But there was a glimmer of potential energy beneath that trepidation. Brian shifted uneasily, glancing at a few curious residents who leaned in with wide eyes, eager and restless. Margaret took a breath, grounding herself. "What do we expect to find?" she queried, a hint of determination lining her voice. The answer to that question felt more pressing than any therapy session or professional meeting she had ever endured. "It could be a mess," Judith admitted, squaring her shoulders as she prepared to take action. "Or it could be a revelation. Either way, we face it together." As the door slowly creaked open, the smell of dust and forgotten memories wafted out, mingling with the excited murmurs of the gathered crowd. What emerged sparked an inquisitive energy. A stash of forgotten belongings, old photo albums, and several boxes whose contents were now spilling out, layered in sheets of time. Shadows curiously danced around Margaret as she stepped closer, her own fears melding into the excitement of the group. "Let's sort through them," she said, surprising herself once more. The sound of her voice felt different, more assured. Each item could tell a story, perhaps even push her to confront shadows she had long avoided. She crouched beside a box, feeling the energy of others pressing around, each aware that they were participating in something precious, a shared uncovering that resonated with Judith's earlier messages about vulnerability and connection. With trembling fingers, she reached into the box, pulling out a faded teddy bear with one broken eye. In that moment, it was as if her past intertwined with the fabric of these objects, each representing voices waiting to be heard, histories waiting to be unearthed. Margaret locked eyes with Judith, who nodded as if understanding the silent vow being formed. This place, with its unearthed stories, felt like an invitation to shape not only her engagement with the residents, but to also rewrite her own narrative. Yet the longer they uncovered, the more complex it became. Some items evoked bittersweet nostalgia, others, painful memories. The challenge grew more palpable. What do they reveal about her? Would she find the courage to embrace the layers of stories that demand acknowledgement? Margaret's heart thudded as she dug deeper. There was no turning back now. These discoveries would lay the groundwork for her journey, opening doors she hadn't anticipated. But as she reached into the box again, her fingers grazed something solid. A small, locked diary. Its presence brought an electric jolt of shifted expectation, hinting at secrets that felt almost too heavy to bear. What lay inside could be a key to understanding stories not just of the past, but also of her present. In this fragile moment of connection, Margaret felt eerily aware that they had only just begun. "What now?" she mouthed to Judith, their shared resolve palpable. The intensity of what this night would unfold overwhelmed her. Would they find answers, or would the quest for understanding lead them astray? As they pondered the next steps forward, voices surrounding them heightened with urgency and anticipation. More than just stories awaited. Hidden truths beckoned, and Margaret needed to grasp the depths of her commitment. Would she have the strength to unlock her own hidden diary along with the ones in front of her? Only time would tell. Margaret's fingers lingered on the diary, the cold metal of the latch biting into her skin. The locked diary became more than just an object. It embodied her hesitation, her fears about confronting past wounds. Around her, the atmosphere radiated a blend of fervor and nervousness, an electrical charge that hummed beneath the surface. "I'll find a way to open it," she whispered, the words tumbling out before she could dissect their implication. Their eyes locked again, and Judith's nod felt like a silent agreement, a pact of bravery. An impulse surged within Margaret as the walls around her began to dissipate. The air thickened with the fragrance of dust, mingled with the palpable curiosity surrounding her. Was each individual in the room confronting their own unknown, just as she was? She clenched the diary tighter, feeling the weight of its potential. "Can someone get a paperclip or something to pick the lock?" Judith suggested, her voice breaking through the thickening anxiety like a beacon. Brian darted away, and Margaret sensed the moment swell with a collective anticipation. She could almost hear the shifting of unspoken stories resonating within the objects that lay strewn about. "I'd rather not leave this moment," she admitted to Judith, her voice steady yet trembling with the weight of revelation. "What if it slips away?" "We won't let it." Judith's eyes were fierce, conveying an understanding that was unasked yet profound. As they waited, Margaret's gaze wandered over the assortment before them. A photo album lay open, weathered pages unfurling memories captured in muted colors. She approached the album, her heart quickening, as she traced the faces of unfamiliar residents captured in moments of laughter. Would some of their stories resemble her own? "What's next?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper, more to herself than anyone else. They were in uncharted waters, the gentle swell of vulnerability surfacing alongside buried uncertainty. Brian returned, breathless and holding a thin wire. "Here, let's see if it works," he urged. Margaret took it, feeling its flicker of possibility. She settled back on her heels, unable to tear her gaze from the locked diary. The moment crystallized. In the flickering shadows of the storage room, she felt the weight of expectation settle heavily on her shoulders. Confrontation was inevitable. There was no escape. Everything within her screamed for it, the need to know, to challenge the narratives that had shaped her identity. What if the contents of that diary held not just the stories of others, but her own unspoken truths? As Brian meticulously worked at the lock, Margaret felt the heartbeat of the group swell around her, a palpable mixture of trepidation and excitement. A few shared whispers stirred, others traded anxious glances, their eyes flickering back and forth between the diary and Margaret. "I can do this," she murmured to herself, the affirmation cutting through the turmoil. The locked diary was a metaphor for her life thus far. Would she dare to unlock it? The click of the lock echoed like thunder in the depths of her mind. Time seemed to suspend, each breath heavy with potential. She inhaled deeply, a ripple of energy coursing through her, yearning not just for the secrets the diary held, but for the revelation that awaited her in the act of unlocking her own history. "You ready?" Brian asked, his voice taut with anticipation. Margaret caught Judith's eye, their silent communication igniting courage within her. With a nod, she felt every person's breath merge with hers, a singular pulse of hope, inquiry, and daring. Together, they were all on the precipice of discovery, and she longed to dive in. As the diary flung open, its fragile pages spread like wings, the musty scent of old paper carving pathways into her consciousness. The first sentence leapt out at her, striking a chord of familiarity that reverberated in her chest. It challenged her understanding of herself. Would this revelation define her, or would she carve out her own narrative in response? Just then, a raucous sound echoed from beyond the doorway, causing her to jump. The collective atmosphere shifted once more. New uncertainties slammed against the fragile shell of their shared assurance. Had they merely disturbed a restless spirit? Or was there something more, something waiting to be unleashed? Margaret's heart quickened as her eyes darted toward the source of the noise. What should have brought clarity now threatened to spiral into chaos. She wondered, had they opened one door at the expense of another? The tension gripped her anew. The next chapter of this journey shimmered uneasily on the boundaries of chaos and clarity. Would she find the courage to face whatever came next? Margaret's breath hitched in her throat as she wrestled with the shifting tide of emotions. The click of the lock had felt like a rallying cry, and now uncertainty loomed like a storm cloud. Was their shared moment of bravery about to be eclipsed by whatever lurked beyond the door? The noise intensified. A cascade of clinks that reverberated through the room, leaving her pulse racing. Was it merely some unwelcome visitor? The resident dog, perhaps, rummaging for attention? Or was it something more insidious, a reminder of forgotten stories that the diary dared her to confront? A chill crept through her as she folded her hands protectively over the diary. "Should we check it out?" Brian's voice quavered, the thin wire of previously simmering excitement now taut with tension. Margaret inhaled sharply, her mind churning. Whatever lay before them, be it revelation or ruin, could expose parts of her life she had long considered buried. "Let's stay together. Whatever it is, we should face it as a group." A nod of solidarity from Judith settled her nerves, if only slightly. The act of facing the unknown wasn't just about unlocking the diary, it was about unlocking each of their shared fears. Each person around her, with their own trials etched into their expressions, now appeared more alive, their vulnerabilities pulsing in tandem with her own. Margaret turned back to the diary, determined to press forward. The first page displayed a familiar scrawl that ignited a tumult of memories, navigating the clutter of her past. A tight knot formed in her stomach as she realized the significance of what lay before her. It wasn't merely a recounting of the past, but a call to confront all the narratives she had been told, and had told herself. "What does it say?" Judith asked, her voice reverberating through the silence once more. Holding the diary, Margaret felt the weight of expectation rest heavily upon her. "It's, about loss." Her voice quavered, each word a fragile thread snapping into place. As she read the first passage aloud, her own story began to intertwine with faded ink. Faces of people she had loved, forged memories of shared laughter, and moments flickered vividly in her mind. Moments also tinged with grief and longing. The noise broke through again. The door creaked, followed by the sound of something jingling. The atmosphere crackled anew, tension hanging like a taut wire waiting to snap. "What if it's just an animal?" Brian speculated, yet even as he spoke the words, uncertainty painted his brow. But Margaret's eyes were locked on the diary, and her resolve strengthened. With every word that spilled forth, she understood that lingering in the shadows only served to perpetuate fear. She needed to confront her life head-on. This moment, raw as it was, felt like an avenue of empowerment, a chance not just to discover her past but to reclaim it with all its jagged edges. Suddenly she pushed the diary down, turning her attention to Brian and Judith. "I think we should split up. That noise isn't just a dog anymore. We need to be aware, but we can't let it distract us from why we're here." The group's uncertainty swirled. They hesitated for a fraction of a second, but then determination ignited. Judith agreed to accompany her toward the noise as Brian circled to the back of the room. They were divvying up their vulnerability in a way that felt strangely liberating. As they edged forward, Margaret grasped the diary firmly, its contents serving as both a map and a shield. The fear that tinged the air was palpable, yet it also morphed into courage, shaping the intimate bond of shared discovery, rooted in the potential for personal transformation. Each step toward the source of the sound melded with the pulse of her heartbeat, a metronome of inevitability. "Whatever it is, we face it," she reiterated, a mantra she clung to. Margaret's gaze flickered back to the first entry of the diary. The lingering words prompted clarity. Sometimes, facing the chaos meant pulling at threads that had long been woven into fabric of identity. What awaited them at the heart of whatever stirred in the shadows was just another chapter of her own story, yet to be defined. Then the door creaked open wider. A shadow lingered at the threshold. Would she find what she sought, or would darkness consume her resolve? In that moment she stood on the brink of discovery, both terrifying and thrilling, awaiting the final reveal that could change everything. The silhouette loomed larger as the door creaked wider, revealing a space veiled in shadows. Margaret's heart drummed in her ears, each beat a pulse of urgency that urged her to act. The atmosphere felt dense, yet she found a strange sense of clarity in the whirlwind of fear. "Let's go," she urged, glancing back at Judith, whose wide eyes mirrored her trepidation. They moved forward cautiously, propelled by an instinct deep within her, the need to confront not only the unknown, but the fears she had long suppressed. As they stepped into the dim light, Margaret's mind raced ahead. This moment was more than about physical exploration. It was about peeling back layers she had masked for too long. The diary in her grip felt heavier, as though it anticipated unveiling deeper truths. "Do you feel that?" Judith whispered, the tremor in her voice stark against the silence. "What? The fear?" Margaret replied, forcing a half-smile. "Or the excitement of what we might uncover?" Judith chuckled nervously, tension undulating between them as they pressed onward. The shadow dissolved into a corner, revealing itself to be an old cabinet, its wooden exterior chipped and worn, yet full of possibilities. Margaret's fingers brushed along its surface, the grains molding themselves into familiar shapes, reigniting memories of her childhood home. "Help me with this," she said, nodding toward the cabinet. They pulled open the creaky doors together, and oddities greeted them, old photographs, forgotten books, and trinkets that seemed to echo with stories yearning to be told. Each item she uncovered felt like a tangible piece of herself. Through the flicker of the dim light, a glimmer caught her eye, a locket nestled in the corner, dulled by time but still intact. Margaret's breath hitched as she picked it up, the weight of it in her palm stirring fragments of heartache and loss. Her grandmother's locket lost years ago. "Margaret!" Judith's voice trailed, sensing the profundity of the moment. "I thought it was gone," Margaret whispered, her fingers carefully prying it open. The image inside, a smiling face surrounded by affection, wrapped her in a wave of nostalgia. "I left so much of myself behind. I need to retrieve it all." The realization sparked a dormant bravery within her, one that extended far beyond the recovery of a locket. This dive into the past, into the corners of her heart, demanded more than physical items. It required her to face the emotional remnants that lingered like silent phantoms. "This is why we came here," she stated, finding her own voice strong amidst the chaos. "To reclaim pieces we thought were lost, pieces that define us." Stepping back, Margaret surveyed the contents of the cabinet. Each artifact was an invitation to connect the dots of her life, urging her to wrestle with the complex relationships and painful memories she had shunned. The emotional tapestry was threaded with love and loss, woven into a rich narrative that only she could author. But just as the warmth of determination began to fill her chest, a sudden sound, the unmistakable jingle of keys, an echo of the past, snapped her focus. The door they had initially opened creaked ominously, as if sensing their discovery, and she spun toward it, apprehension coiling in her gut. "Did you hear that?" she asked Judith, whose face mirrored her concern. Yeah, I did. But it's just the wind, right? Something in Margaret's gut told her it was more than just a draft. The unearthing of the past had awakened something. Perhaps it was the very spirit of memories she hadn't reconciled. Maybe we should just— No, Margaret interrupted, adrenaline coursing through her. We need to find out what that is. It's like the diary. There's something hiding in the shadows, waiting to be confronted. Judith hesitated, but in Margaret's eyes she saw the same fire that drove her own resolve. Together they approached the door once more, now emboldened by a purpose that overshadowed their fears. The past had begun to reveal itself. Margaret could feel the weight of her childhood, her memories, urging her to face whatever lurked behind that door. There was no turning back now. This chapter of her life demanded absolute engagement, and she was prepared to dive deeper. As they reached for the door handle, the sound within grew clearer. A voice echoing from beyond beckoned them closer. What lay on the other side could either be the resolution she sought, or a confrontation with all she had avoided. With her heartbeat echoing a vibrant rhythm, Margaret turned the knob. Would this moment unlock the next phase of her transformation, or lead them into an even darker realm of the past? The air thickened with anticipation as the door swung open, revealing the unknown, poised to change everything once again. As Margaret pushed the door open, fear and anticipation mixed within her, igniting the spark of courage she had been nurturing. Space unfolded before her, bathed in dim light where shadows danced along the walls, whispering secrets that had been hidden away for far too long. The faint sound of a voice grew clearer, resonating with an echo of familiarity, sending a cascade of emotions coursing through her. Upon entering the room, a sight met her eyes that she had not expected. A gathering of several residents seated in a semicircle, their expressions a mix of curiosity and apprehension. It was a spontaneous assembly, their chatter moments ago subdued as they glimmered with spirit and shared history. Directly in the center sat an old phonograph with records scattered like treasures waiting to be unearthed, each a portal to memories that could connect their pasts to the present. "Margaret!" A surprised voice broke through the silence. Ellie, one of her former students, waved from the group. Margaret's heart surged as she locked eyes with the familiar face, reminding her of the purpose she had outlined days ago. She exchanged a glance with Judith, who nodded, recognizing this moment was just as significant as their search through the hidden room. It clicked into place. People didn't merely want to engage with artifacts, they craved connection, the intertwining of stories like threads woven together. "Is this a gathering?" Judith prompted gently, leading them further into the room. Ellie, bright-eyed and animated, gestured for them to join. "We decided to share some old records and reminisce. You should join us, Margaret. Everyone has been waiting to hear your story about the letters." Margaret felt a swell of recognition warm her spirit. In this impromptu assembly, she could see remnants of her former self reflected in each resident. The teacher who once inspired, the mentor who shared whispers of encouragement. "I'd love to," Margaret replied, her voice steady and firm, reinforced by the collective anticipation of the gathered faces. "But I want to do more than just share. I want us to explore our memories together." Margaret turned toward the phonograph, carefully lifting a record from the pile, her fingers grazing its smooth surface. Each of us carries stories worth sharing, moments of joy, lessons learned, and perhaps even grief. We can give voice to them, just like I gave voice to you. As she began to play the record, the comforting notes filled the air, wrapping around them like a nostalgic hug. She could feel every emotion heavy in the room, mingling with the sound waves like harmonized breaths shared in unison. "Let's remember together," she started, finding renewed confidence in sharing her own experiences, allowing her struggles with identity, loss, and the search for self to create a safe space for others. "The letters I kept were messages of hope. But you know what I realized?" Margaret paused, holding the gazes of the residents, each one uniquely present, filled with untapped stories. "Those letters were not just for you. They were also for me. They remind me that our histories don't define our futures unless we allow them to." Judith's presence beside her bolstered her resolve, as Margaret's voice transcended uncertainty and merged with the warmth of the room. With each story that emerged, woven from each resident's past. They all found common ground, making connections that extinguished any flickering shadows of fear. Margaret spoke about Ellie's journey, how their paths had crossed and intertwined in unexpected ways, leading to her own growth. She listened intently as others began to share their own stories, bold recollections of childhood dreams and forgotten passions that reverberated through the air. Gradually, the room transformed, laughter spilling like sunlight through the shadows. The hidden depth of each personal narrative resonated within Margaret, invigorating her spirit. They were creating a sanctuary, and with every shared experience, she could feel pieces of herself falling into place. Like the locket she had recovered, it was a reminder of the bonds that never truly faded. As the evening progressed, strangers connected and bonds formed, and the initial gathering had blossomed into something far richer than she could ever have imagined. Each resident found their voice amidst the comfort of collective vulnerability, and Margaret discovered the strength in melding their narratives with hers. Before long, a moment arrived when she was approached by Ellie, a glimmer of excitement shining in her eyes. "Margaret, we've been talking and—" She hesitated, gauging the weight of her words. "We'd love to make this a regular thing. Can we call it Letters from the Heart? Your guidance means so much." A tide of emotion coursed through Margaret as she heard the proposal. The title held significance, a reflection of not just her mission, but also what the group had done together that night. Fresh resolve enveloped her, and her heart swelled with pride she hadn't felt in years. "Yes, absolutely," she declared, the realization that she had stepped into her own narrative, empowered not just by others' stories, but also by her own transformation. "Let's make this a place where we share, connect, and inspire one another, where our collective narrative converges and becomes a canvas for all our stories." As she spoke those words, she knew she had not only rediscovered herself through guiding the group, but had also reclaimed a sense of belonging, shaping hope and fulfillment from the very letters that had once echoed as mere fragments of the past. The warmth of connection enveloped her, and she felt not just a teacher or a mentor, but also a participant in the shared journey, with newfound purpose. Together they created an ongoing tapestry of history, built from their vulnerability, resilience, and hope. This was the moment Margaret had envisioned, the nurturing of hearts through shared narratives, and she reveled in the brilliance of it all. Each chapter brought closure to her past, but also shaped a future ripe with stories yet to be told, adventures to be had, and a legacy to inspire. And as the last strains of the record faded into silence, she took a deep breath, realizing that was only the beginning. To all of our viewers, this is the moment to act. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that inspire us to embrace personal transformation. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, because your support is vital. Comment below your thoughts and reactions to this remarkable ending. We can't wait to hear from you. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this powerful conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting our channel through these actions.